Good morning, listeners, and welcome to yet another podcast series brought to you by Legis Indica. Today, we're discussing the Supreme Court of India's reportable judgment, Vihaan Kumar versus the State of Haryana.
Hello. Yes, this is quite an interesting one. It involves Mr. Vihaan Kumar challenging his arrest. He took his case all the way up to the Supreme Court after the High Court didn't rule in his favor.
Right, and it landed before Justices Oka and Singh.
That's correct. They really had to weigh some fundamental arguments here.
Okay, so let's dig into that. What were the big questions the Supreme Court was grappling with in this specific case?
Well, there were really three main things they focused on. First off, was the arrest itself actually illegal? Specifically, did they fail to tell Mr. Kumar why he was being arrested? That's a right under Article 22(1).
Okay, the right to know the grounds. What else?
Second, there were some pretty serious allegations about how he was treated later in the hospital, being handcuffed, chained to a bed. The court looked at whether that crossed the line and violated his basic dignity, which is protected under Article 21.
Wow, okay. That sounds serious. And the third point?
The third was more of a legal question. If an arrest is illegal right at the start, can things that happen later, like, say, filing a charge sheet, somehow make it okay? Can you fix an illegal arrest after the fact?
Got it. So a mix of factual issues about the arrest and treatment and a key legal principle. Let's start at the beginning then, the arrest itself and these alleged violations. What was Mr. Kumar's side of the story?
Well, Mr. Kumar claimed he was picked up pretty early on June 10th, 2024, around 10:30 in the morning.
Okay.
And he wasn't brought before a magistrate until the next afternoon, about 3:30 p.m. So part of his argument hinted at maybe a violation of the 24-hour rule in Article 22.
The time limit to see a magistrate.
Exactly. But the really central point for him, the main thrust of his argument under Article 22, was that nobody actually told him the reasons, the grounds for his arrest when it happened.
Just, you're under arrest, and that's it.
That's essentially what he claimed, yes, a lack of proper communication.
So what did the state, Haryana, say happened? Their timing was different, wasn't it?
Yes, significantly different. The state maintained the arrest didn't happen until 6:00 p.m. that evening, Juneteenth.
Which would put them within the 24-hour window for the magistrate appearance.
Correct. And regarding the grounds for arrest, the state insisted they did tell him. They argued it was communicated orally right there at the time of arrest. They also mentioned that his wife was informed too.
Okay, so a direct clash there. You didn't tell me versus, yes, we did orally, and we told your wife. How did the Supreme Court approach this? Did they look at past cases?
They absolutely did. They brought up two key precedents, Pankaj, Bansal v. Union of India, and also Prabir Prakayastha v. State, NCT of Delhi.
And what's the takeaway from those cases?
The consistent message from the Supreme Court in those, and reiterated here, is that telling someone the grounds of arrest isn't just, a tick box exercise. It has to be meaningful and effective communication.
Meaningful and effective. So more than just mumbling something.
Precisely. And while the Constitution itself, Article 22(1), doesn't explicitly say it must be in writing, the court has made it quite clear that putting it in writing is strongly preferred.
Why the preference for writing? Seems obvious, but what's the court's reasoning?
Well, it avoids ambiguity, doesn't it? It creates a clear record. It prevents arguments later about who said what or whether anything was said at all. Oral communication is just too easy to dispute.
Makes sense. So given that preference and the need for meaningful communication, why did the court find the state's version, oral communication, plus telling the wife, insufficient here?
Several reasons. First, the claim about oral communication was just too vague. The state didn't offer any specifics about what was said, how it was explained. It was just a bald assertion.
Okay. Lack of detail.
Second, and this is really important, the court drew a clear line. Telling the arrested person's spouse or family is not the same as fulfilling the constitutional duty to inform the arrested person themselves.
Ah, right. The right belongs to the individual being detained.
Exactly. It's their personal liberty at stake, so they have the right to know directly. Informing the wife might be good practice, maybe humane, but it doesn't satisfy Article 22(1).
That's a critical clarification. And was there anything else? What about the case diary?
Yes, the state pointed to an entry in the police case diary, supposedly made around 6:10 p.m., saying the grounds were communicated. But the court wasn't convinced.
Why not?
They basically saw it as potentially an afterthought. There was no supporting evidence, no detail in that entry about what grounds were communicated. It looked like maybe it was written in later to cover the bases.
So without corroboration, it wasn't enough.
Not nearly enough. And the court emphasized that the burden of proof here lies squarely on the state. They have to demonstrate, positively show, that they complied with the constitutional requirement. They couldn't.
So the final verdict on the arrest itself.
The court ruled definitively. The arrest was illegal due to noncompliance with Article 22(1). Full stop.
A very strong statement on procedural safeguards. Now, let's shift to that other deeply concerning aspect, the treatment in the hospital. You said handcuffing and chaining.
Yes. After his arrest, Mr. Kumar needed medical attention and was admitted to PGIM's Rohtak. And while he was a patient there, he was handcuffed and actually chained to the hospital bed.
Chained to the bed.
Indeed. And crucially, this wasn't just an allegation. There were photographs submitted to the court showing this. The court referred to it as a critical additional grievance.
I can imagine. What was the Supreme Court's take on seeing photographic proof of someone chained to a hospital bed?
They were, frankly, appalled. They condemned it in the strongest terms. They called it a gross violation of dignity under Article 21.
Article 21, the right to life and personal liberty, which includes dignity.
Absolutely. The court also described the treatment as shocking and unconstitutional. They strongly reinforced the principle that even if someone is accused or under arrest, they don't lose their basic human dignity.
It seems particularly egregious in a hospital setting. The person is already vulnerable, perhaps unwell.
That's exactly the point. There was no apparent justification offered for why such extreme measures were necessary. In his case, no indication he was a flight risk from a hospital bed or posed a violent threat requiring chains.
So it wasn't just condemnation. Did the court order any action?
Yes, they did. Beyond just criticizing, they issued a positive direction to the state of Haryana. They ordered the state government to formulate and issue specific guidelines prohibiting the handcuffing or chaining of accused individuals while they are admitted in hospitals.
That's significant, setting a standard for future conduct. Did the state say anything about the officers involved in this incident?
Yes, the state did inform the court that action had been taken. They mentioned that the police officers responsible for the handcuffing and chaining had been suspended.
Suspended, okay.
And that a departmental inquiry had been initiated against them.
So, some accountability, at least initiated. Okay, moving to the third major point. The state's argument about subsequent legal steps. They tried to argue that filing a charge sheet somehow cured the initial illegal arrest.
That was their contention, yes. The argument basically went, even if, hypothetically, there was an issue with the arrest itself, the fact that we later investigated and filed a formal charge sheet outlining the case against him makes his ongoing detention valid.
Sort of like saying, well, we found enough evidence later, so the initial step doesn't matter anymore.
Essentially, yes. Trying to legitimize the custody after the fact.
And did the Supreme Court accept that logic?
Not for a moment. They rejected it flat out. The court was very clear. Constitutional violations that happen at the very beginning, at the moment of arrest, cannot be wiped away or cured by procedural steps taken later on.
So the foundation has to be sound. You can't build a legal detention on an illegal starting point.
Precisely. The court's reasoning was that if the arrest itself is illegal specifically because Article 22 wasn't followed, then any subsequent detention based on that arrest is tainted. Any remand orders obtained after that illegal arrest are themselves invalid.
The illegality flows through the whole process.
Exactly. The initial sin, so to speak, cannot be absolved by later actions.
Now, Justice Singh wrote a separate concurring opinion. Did he just agree, or did he add a different perspective?
He absolutely agreed with Justice Soka's main conclusions, but he wanted to add some emphasis, particularly on the sheer importance of Article 22(1).
How so?
He really hammered home the point that telling someone why they're being arrested isn't just some minor procedural rule. He framed it as a fundamental safeguard, deeply interwoven with the right to liberty itself under Article 21. It's not just procedure, it's substance.
A cornerstone of liberty, not just a box to tick.
You've got it. And building on that, Justice Singh strongly advocated for the grounds to be given in writing.
Again, the emphasis on written communication.
Yes, because he argued that's the only way the arrested person can effectively understand the accusation and begin to challenge their detention, get legal help, apply for bail. Oral communication just doesn't provide that solid basis.
And he connected this to other laws too, right? Not just the Constitution.
Yes, he did. He pointed to specific laws like Section 50 of the Criminal Procedure Code, CRPC.
Which is now Section 47 in the new Sanhita of the BNSS.
Right, Section 47 of BNSS 2023. And also Section 19 of the PMLA, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. He said these laws essentially operationalize the constitutional right in Article 22(1). They put it into action.
They make the constitutional right practical.
Exactly. And therefore, failing to follow these statutory requirements, failing to communicate the grounds as these laws require, isn't just a procedural slip-up. He called it a fatal illegality.
Fatal illegality. That's strong language.
It is. It means it invalidates the entire process from that point. He also mentioned Section 50A of the CRPC.
What's the significance of 50A?
Section 50A is about the police's duty to inform a relative or a friend nominated by the arrested person about the arrest and the grounds. Justice Singh stressed that this is also vital.
Why? How does informing a relative help?
Because it allows that support network to swing into action, quickly arrange for a lawyer, start thinking about bail. It's part of ensuring the arrested person isn't just isolated and unable to seek help. So, for Justice Singh, failing to inform both the arrestee and their nominated person, preferably in writing, fundamentally undermines the whole system of safeguards.
So both judges were really aligned on the absolute necessity of proper, clear communication of grounds right at the start.
Absolutely lined. No ambiguity there.
Okay, so wrapping this all together, what was the final outcome, the Supreme Court's decision?
Well, as you'd expect given their reasoning, the Supreme Court allowed Mr. Kumar's appeal. Meaning they officially declared his arrest to be illegal because it violated Article 22(1), and the direct consequence of that declaration was an order for his immediate release from custody.
Immediate release. And what about the remand orders?
All quashed. The court invalidated all subsequent orders that had authorized his continued detention because they stemmed from that initial illegal arrest.
And the handcuffing issue.
They reiterated their direction to the State of Haryana to issue those guidelines against handcuffing accused persons in hospitals.
So, a comprehensive victory for the appellant, Mr. Kumar, touching on all the key issues he raised.
Yes, a very clear judgment reinforcing these fundamental rights. It sends a strong message about the non-negotiable nature of these constitutional protections during arrest and detention.
Right, okay. So let's try and boil this down. What are the main takeaways from our deep dive today?
I think, first and foremost, the Supreme Court has powerfully reasserted that the fundamental rights of anyone arrested are paramount, especially that right under Article 22(1), to be told clearly and promptly why you're being arrested.
And preferably in writing.
Preferably in writing, yes. Second, the court took an incredibly strong stance against degrading treatment, like the handcuffing and chaining in the hospital. Dignity under Article 21 isn't suspended upon arrest.
A crucial point.
And third, perhaps the most significant legal principle reaffirmed here, is that an initial illegality in the arrest process, a violation of these core rights, cannot be cured or overlooked just because of later steps like filing a charge sheet. The foundation matters.
The entire detention becomes unlawful if the start was unlawful.
That's the essence of it. This judgment really highlights that these aren't just suggestions. They are mandatory constitutional safeguards.
It certainly makes you pause and consider the real-world implications, doesn't it? You think about ensuring transparency, ensuring accountability every time someone's liberty is curtailed.
Absolutely.
And it drives home how critical it is that these safeguards aren't just words on paper, but are actually effectively put into practice by law enforcement on the ground. That's what protects individual freedom.
Well said. It's about translating these high court principles into everyday reality to genuinely safeguard liberty and dignity for everyone.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more updates on key Indian Supreme Court's decisions.